Hey, hi folks. So today we will be going over chapter 3 of the system design interview book, a framework for system design interviews. In chapter 2, we went over power of 2, how it relates to the size, megabyte, kilobyte, and then petabyte all the way through to terabytes and quadrillion bytes. And also we went over latency numbers, how much time it takes from a scale of nanoseconds when you do a fetch from a L1 cache to millisecond scale when you do a round trip across the continent, and how it is the bottleneck there is speed of light, and how you should reduce the distance if you can't change the speed with which light travels. And then we went over availability numbers, what it means to have uh, three nines, four nines, five nines of availability. How is it calculated? How much of a downtime you can afford? Things like that. We did a good calculation about it also, where we theoretically derive what does 99.99% uptime means, and how much of minutes or seconds of downtime you are allowed if you claim to have, say, 99.9999% of uptime in a year. So yeah, if you haven't seen the last video, I would recommend you go check that out first. And also we did a sample interview question where you were asked to estimate how much would be the queries per second that Twitter would be getting, and how much storage and other requirements you might have for such a system. So today we will be going over a framework for system design interviews. So yeah, let's get started. You have just landed a coveted on-site interview at your dream company. The hiring coordinator sends you a schedule for that day. Scanning down the list, you feel pretty good about it until your eyes land on this interview session. System design interview. Until you see system design interview. System design interviews are often intimidating. It could be as vague as designing a well-known product X. The questions are ambiguous and seem unreasonably broad. Your weariness is understandable. After all, how could anyone design a popular product in an hour that has taken hundreds, if not thousands, of engineers to build? Alright. The good news is that no one expects you to. Alright. Real world system design is extremely complicated. For example, Google search is deceptively simple. However, the amount of technology that underpins that simplicity is truly astonishing. If no one expects you to design a real world system in an hour, what is the benefit of a system design interview? One might ask. The system design interview simulates real life problem solving where two co-workers collaborate on an ambiguous problem and come up with a solution that meets their goals. Alright. The problem is open-ended and there is no perfect answer. The final design is less important compared to the work you put in the design process. This allows you to demonstrate your design skill, defend your design choices, and respond to feedback in a constructive manner. Let us flip the table and consider what goes through the interviewer's head as she walks into the conference room to meet you. The primary goal of the interviewer is to accurately assess your abilities. The last thing she wants is to give an inconclusive evaluation because the session has gone poorly and there are not enough signals. Alright, so far so good. What is an interviewer looking for in a system design interview? Many think that system design interview is all about a person's technical design skills. It is much more than that. An effective system design interview gives strong signals about a person's ability to collaborate, to work under pressure, and resolve ambiguity constructively. The ability to ask good questions is also an essential skill, and many interviewers specifically look for this skill. A good interviewer also looks for red flags. Over engineering is a real disease of many engineers as they delight in design purity and ignore trade offs. They are often unaware of the compounding costs of over engineered systems, and many companies pay a high price for the ignorance. You certainly do not want to demonstrate this tendency in a system design interview. Other red flags include narrow mindedness, stubbornness, etc. In this chapter, we will go over some useful tips and introduce a simple and effective framework to solve system design interview problems. A four-step process for effective system design interview. Every system design interview is different. A great system design interview is open-ended and there is no one-size-fits-all solution. However, there are steps and common ground to cover in every system design interview. Step 1. Understand the problem and establish design scope. Okay. Why did the tiger roar? A hand shot up in the back of the class. Yes, Jimmy, the teacher responded. Because he was hungry. Very good, Jimmy. Throughout his childhood, Jimmy has always been the first to answer questions in the class. Whenever the teacher asks a question, there is always a kid in the classroom who loves to take a crack at the question, no matter if he knows the answer or not. That is Jimmy. Jimmy is an ace student. He takes pride in knowing all the answers fast. In exams, he is usually the first person to finish the questions. He is a teacher's top choice for any academic competition. Don't be like Jimmy. In a system design interview, giving out an answer quickly without thinking gives you no bonus points. Answering without a thorough understanding of the requirements is a huge red flag as the interview is not a trivia contest. There is no right answer. It's more on the goal is to have a more open-ended discussion rather than just blurting out with efficiency of O of 1 and moving on. So that is something that you are not supposed to be doing. All right, moving on. So do not jump right in to give a solution. Slow down, think deeply, preferably think out loud. Let the interviewer know about your thought process and ask questions to clarify requirements and assumptions that the interviewer might have while they gave you this problem. This is extremely important. As an engineer, we like to solve hard problems and jump into the final design. However, this approach is likely to lead you to designing the wrong system. One of the most important skills as an engineer is to ask the right questions, make the proper assumptions, and gather all the information needed to build a system. So do not be afraid to ask questions. When you ask a question, the interviewer either answers your questions directly or asks you to make your assumptions. Alright. If the latter happens, write down your assumptions on the whiteboard or paper. You might need them later. What kind of questions to ask? Ask questions to understand the exact requirements. Here is a list of questions to help you get started. What specific features are we going to build? How many users does the product have? How fast does the company anticipate to scale up? What are the anticipated scales in 3, 6 months and a year from now? What is the company's tech stack? What existing services you might leverage to simplify the design? For example, if you are asked to design a newsfeed system, you want to ask questions that help you clarify the requirements. The conversation between you and the interviewer might look like this. Candidate: is this a mobile app or a web app or both? Interviewer: both. C: what are the most important features of the product? I: ability to make a post and see friends' news feed. Candidate: is the news feed sorted in reverse chronological order or a particular order? The particular order means each post is given a different weight. For instance, posts from your close friends are more important than posts from a group or some other criteria. Interviewer: to keep things simple, let us assume the feed is sorted by reverse chronological order. Candidate: how many friends a user can have? Is there an upper cap? Interviewer: 5,000. Candidate: what is the traffic volume? Interviewer: 10 million DAU, daily active users. Candidate: can feed contain images, videos, or just text? Interviewer: it can contain media files, including both images and videos. Above are some sample questions that you can ask your interviewer. It is important to understand the requirements and clarify ambiguities. Step 2. Propose high level design and get a buy in from the interviewer. In this step, we aim to develop a high level design and reach an agreement with the interviewer on the design. It is a great idea to collaborate with the interviewer during this process. Coming up with an initial blueprint for the design, ask for feedback, treat your interviewer as a teammate and work together. Many good interviewers love to talk and get involved. Draw box diagrams with key components on the whiteboard or paper. This might include clients, mobile web APIs, web servers, data stores, cache, CDN, message queue, and more. Do back of the envelope calculations to evaluate if your blueprint fits the scale constraints. Think out loud, communicate with your interviewer if back of the envelope is necessary before diving into it. If possible, go through a few concrete use cases. This will help you frame the high level design. It is also likely that the use cases would help you discover edge cases you have not considered. Alright. Should we include API endpoints and database schema here? This depends on the problem. For large design problems like design Google search engine, this is a bit of a too low level. For a problem like designing the backend for a multiplayer poker game, this is a fair game and you might be expected to ask to design the API endpoints and say database schema. So yeah, the key here is to communicate with your interviewer. Example, let us design a newsfeed system to demonstrate how to approach the high level design. Here, you are not required to understand how the system actually works. All the details will be explained later on in this book. At the high level, the design is divided into two flows: feed publishing and news feed building. Feed publishing: when a user publishes a post, corresponding data is written into cache database and the post will be populated into friends news feed. Second bit, newsfeed building. The newsfeed is built by aggregating friends' posts in a reverse chronological order. The below two figures present high-level designs for feed publishing and newsfeed building flows, respectively. There is a user's device, could be a browser or app. DNS is there. The API content is called. Endpoint is called. It goes through a load balancer to a web server. It goes to a post service. There is a layer of cache before the database. Databases are sharded or are in a master slave replication manner. Then there is fan out service, and then there is a notification service. Similarly, for the feed, there is web browser, app, load balancer, web servers, newsfeed service, and then newsfeed cache. Step 3, design deep dive. At this step, you and your interviewer should have already achieved the following objectives: agreed on the overall goals and feature scope, sketched out a high level blueprint for the overall design, obtained feedback from your interviewer on the high level design, had some initial ideas about areas to focus on in deep dive based on her feedback. You shall work with the interviewer to identify and prioritize components in the architecture. It is worth stressing that every interview is different. Sometimes the interviewer may give off hints that she likes focusing on high level design. Sometimes, for a senior candidate interview, the discussion could be on the system performance characteristic, likely focusing on the bottlenecks and resource estimations. In most cases, the interviewer may want you to dig into details of some system components. For URL shortener, it is interesting to dive into the hash function design that converts a long URL to a short one. For a chat system, how to reduce latency and how to support online offline status are two interesting topics. Time management is essential as it is easy to get carried away with minute details that do not demonstrate your abilities. You must be armed with signals to show your interviewer. Try not to get into unnecessary details. For example, talking about EdgeRank algorithm or Facebook feed ranking in detail is not ideal during a system design interview, as this takes much precious time and does not prove your ability in designing a scalable system. At this point, we have discussed the high level design for a newsfeed system, and the interviewer is happy with your proposal. Next, we will investigate two of the most important use cases: feed publishing, second newsfeed retrieval. The below two figures show the detailed design for the two use cases, which will be explained later in chapter 11. Okay, so there are user devices which are calling an endpoint. There is the auth being done. It goes to a load balancer, then web servers. There is a layering of cache before the DB. Then there is fan out service, which pushes it to a message queue. Then there are fan out workers, and then we cache into the news feed. Then there is a graph DB that lets you call all of the friends, and the friends get data through cache, and it is stored in the user DB. So now for so now for the newsfeed retrieval, there is load balancer and there is an app where authentication happens, and then there is newsfeed service. All right, and then there is newsfeed cache, and there is user cache, and there is a post cache. All right. Step 4. The details of these diagrams will come later on, but for now, moving on, wrap up. In this final step, the interviewer might ask you a few follow-up questions or give you the freedom to discuss other additional points. Here are few directions that you should preferably take. The interviewer might want you to identify the system bottlenecks and discuss potential improvements. Never say your design is perfect and nothing can be improved. There is always something to improve upon. This is a great opportunity to show your critical thinking and leave a good impression. It could be useful to give the interviewer a recap of your design. This is particularly important if you suggested a few solutions. Refreshing your interviewer's memory can be helpful after a long session. Error cases, server failure, network loss, etc. are interesting to talk about. Operation issues are worth mentioning. How do you monitor metrics and error logs? How to roll out the system? How to handle the next scale curve is also an interesting topic. For example, if your current design supports 1 million users, what changes do you need to make it support 10 million users? Propose other refinements if you had more time. To wrap up, summarize a list of do's and don'ts. Always ask for clarification. Do not assume your assumptions are correct. Understand the requirements of the problem. A solution designed to solve the problems of a young startup is different from that established company with millions of users. Make sure you understand the requirements. Let the interviewer know what you are thinking. Communicate with your interviewer. Suggest multiple approaches if possible. Once you agree with your interviewer on the blueprint, go into details on each component. Design the most critical components first. Bounce ideas off of the interviewer. A good interviewer works with you as a teammate. Never give up. Don'ts. Don't be unprepared for typical interview questions. Don't jump into a solution without clarifying the requirements and assumptions. Don't go into too much detail on a single component in the beginning. Give the high level design first, then drill down. If you get stuck, do not hesitate to ask for hints. Again, communicate. Don't think in silence. Don't think your interview is done once you give the design. You are not done until your interviewer says you are done. Ask for feedback early and often. Time allocation on each step. System design interview questions are usually very broad. 45 minutes to an hour is not enough to cover the entire design. Time management is of the essence here. How much time should you spend on each step? The following is a very rough guide on distributing your time in a 45-minute session. Please remember this is a rough estimate and the actual time distribution depends on the scope of the problem and the requirements that the interviewer has raised. Step 1. Understand the problem and establish the design scope. It can take you anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes. Step 2. Propose high level design and get a buy-in. This will take another 10 to 15 minutes. Then step 3 will be design deep dive where you do a 10 to 25 minutes. And then step 4 will be wrap up. While wrapping up, go over the things that you have established and revise your whole idea, what all things that you wanted to do, and then error cases, edge cases, and how do you scale for the next milestone, things like that. So that's what comes in step 4. So yeah, that was all about chapter 3 of system design interview book. Here we went over how to conduct yourself in an interview setting and how you can logically approach the question that are raised to you. So yeah, that was chapter 3. Thanks a lot for tuning in. See you next time with chapter 4. Okay, bye.